Welcome back, everybody. So we've looked at solving one-step equations, we've looked at solving two-step equations. Now we're going to look at multi-step equations and how to solve them. So what does a multi-step equation look like? It's where we have variables on both sides of the equation. And so our goal, as you remember, is to get the variable on one side of the equal sign isolated by itself. And if there's a variable on one side of the equal sign, there's got to be a number on the other side of the equal sign. And once you have that variable isolated on one side, and then you have a number on the other side, then you can get your answer to what that equation or the variable in that equation is. So let's go back to our first example and how to solve this. Oops. So we said our goal first is to isolate the variable. So that means I need to get b on either the left side of the equal sign or the right side of the equal sign. It honestly does not matter which side of the equal sign it is on, as long as you get it there and it's all by itself. My personal preference whenever I'm determining how to get it to one side is I always start with the lower absolute value. So I have 3b and 8b, and I'm going to start with my variables to solve this. I always choose the 3b. What that means is I want to take the 3b away from this side and move it to the other side of the equal sign. And to do that, I must do its inverse operation. So I subtract 3b, and that eliminates it from that side. Now remember, we have to balance our equation. What I do to one side of the equal side, I must do to the other side of the equal sign. So I'm going to subtract that side by -3. At this point, I'm ready to make my next step in the equation. So I'm going to bring down everything in my original problem that I haven't used. So I've got a -15, my equal sign. I have to do my math problem, 8b minus 3b. 8 minus 3 is 5. And then I have plus 5 left. So now I'm down to just a two-step equation. What we did in our previous lesson is where we are at now. I have the variable on this side of the equal sign. I want to isolate it there. So in order to isolate that variable on this side of the equal sign, I have to move that 5. So to move that 5, I do its inverse operation. So I subtract 5. What I do to one side, I must do to the other side to balance the equation. So I will subtract 5 over here. So at this point, I'm ready to bring everything down to the next step. -15 minus 5 gives me -20. Bring down my equal sign and bring down my variable because that's all that's left. Hey, now I'm down to a one-step equation. It's one of the multiplication ones. -20 equals 5b. I still need to isolate b, get b all by itself. Well, to do that, I've got to do the inverse operation. 5b is 5 times b. So the inverse is divide. I divide by that coefficient of 5. Gets b by itself. Now, I've got to balance my equation. What I do to one side, I must do to the other. So divide that side by 5. So now I end up with b equals, because I got b by itself, whatever -20 divided by 5 is. So b equals -4. So that's the process in solving a multi-step equation. Yes, you will need to use paper in order to solve these. Yes, you will need to show every step of the process in order to accurately solve these. So whenever you're working on these on your own, make sure that you have paper and make sure that you are showing the work because it will help you stay organized and will enhance your percentage of being accurate when solving this. Because a lot of times when students go wrong, they didn't show the proper work and they may miss a negative sign somewhere And that throws the whole problem off. So let's look at another example and how to solve it. 6 minus 2n equals 3 minus 3n. Need to get the variable on one side of the equal sign. So to do that, I'm going to look at my n values. I have negative 2n and negative 3n. My personal preference is to always start with the lower absolute value. You don't have to. You can actually start with that and move it over here. It's just my personal preference. So I have negative 2n. So I'm going to add its inverse over here. That eliminates it from this side. But now to balance the equation, since I've added 2n here, I must add 2n over here. I bring everything else down to my next step of the problem. 6 equals 3, and then I've got negative 3n plus 2n. That gives me negative 1n. So now my n is on this side of the equal sign. That's where it's going to stay. So I've got to move this whole number 3 to this side. To move it, I do its inverse operation. That's a positive 3, because to the left of it, there's no sign. It's a positive 3. The inverse is negative 3. Balance the equation. What I do to one side, I must do to the other. So I bring everything down. 6 minus 3 is 3 equals negative 1n. We have a negative 1 coefficient, so we've got to divide by that negative 1, divide by that negative 1, and that means our n value is 3 divided by negative 1, or negative 3. Few more examples. 7k minus 15 equals 1 minus k. Starting with my k's, my personal preference is starting with the lower absolute value. Negative k is the same as negative 1k, so you can put that 1 there if it helps you out. So I'm going to start with the negative 1k. Inverse operations add 1k. That cancels out. Balance the equation by adding 1k over here. Bring everything down in the next step. I've got 8k minus 15 equals 1. So my variable's over here. That's where it's going to stay now. So I've got to move that whole number to the other side. Do its inverse operation. Bring everything down that's left that I haven't eliminated. 1 plus 15 is 16. Left with 8k equals 16, 8 times k. I'm going to divide by its coefficient to get k isolated all by itself. So k would equal 2. Looking over here, I'm going to start with n. Again, you can put that 1 in front of it. 1n and n are the same thing. I'm going to move my 1n. That eliminates that. Balance the equation. Subtract 1n over here. At this point, I'm ready to bring everything down to the next step. So negative 2 plus 2n equals 6. My n's over here now. So now I need to get the whole number over there so we can get the n all by itself. So I do its inverse operation. Negative 2 plus 2, that's eliminated. Balance the equation, add 2 to the other side. Bring everything down. 6 plus 2 is 8. 2n equals 8. Divide by that coefficient. And then 8 divided by 2 gives me 4. Now, there are some special cases. Sometimes you will have problems that completely eliminate the variables. And that means you only have whole numbers left on both sides of the equal sign. If that happens, and both of those sides have the same number, that equation technically would have an infinite number of solutions. Now, if it were a case where both of the variables were eliminated and you're left with two different numbers on each side of the equal sign, then that equation has no solution. So, the thing down here says these cases happen only when there is no variable left in the equation after solving. So that looks like this. So negative 4 minus b equals negative 6 minus b. I'm going to start here. They're both negative 1b. I'll add 1b here. But what I do to one side, I must do to the other. So I add 1b here. But negative 1b plus 1b is 0. So it eliminates that too. And the only thing that's left in my equation is negative 4, the equal sign, and the negative 6. Does negative 4 equal negative 6? No. So in this case, you would write it as no solution. Let's look over here now. 1 minus 3n equals negative 3n plus 1. Start here to move my n. What I do to one side, I must do to the other. Because negative 3n plus 3n eliminates each other as well. So I'm only left with 1 equals 1. Does 1 equal 1? Yes, it does. So there is where I have an infinite number of solutions. So we've taken you through how to solve multi-step equations, and we've shown you the two special cases that you can come across when solving these types of equations. At this point, go ahead back into your Google Classroom and complete the homework that's attached to this section. If you have any questions, you can always rewatch this video again. If you still have questions, then you can reach out to me. If not, we'll see you next time.